I'd love to come around to each of our panelists and get a bit of background from each of you on your career experience and your experience building a sales team. So Matt, I'd love to come over to you first.
Thanks for the intro, Erika, and great to be here. So I'm Matt Harper, President, Chief Commercial Officer, and one of the co-founders of Invinity. My career arc is that I'm an engineer who slowly got dragged over into the dark side on the commercial world, first in product management, and then in marketing. Since we co-founded Invinity back in 2013, I have been in charge of sales, in addition to sort of the typical founder, chief cook and bottle washer kind of role. So I've had to sort of learn by hard knocks how to put sales teams together, but the good news is that it's gone relatively well. From that napkin sketch through to present, we've won over $150 million worth of business. And we've done that in a super complex industry. There's massive legal, financial, regulatory, technical, and economic complexity in every one of the deals that we do. We've got a phenomenal team now who've got to be really good at that, but we've definitely learned some lessons along the way, and hopefully we can share a little bit of that today.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Jeff, I'll come over to you next if you could share a bit about your career experience and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, great. From a career perspective, my career really has three different phases. So started working in large multinationals and including some early experience. I went to the dark side maybe earlier than Matt did as an engineer, but some early experience in technical sales. The end of that was running business units for multinationals. I also ran M&A for a large multinational. Then migrated to run business for private equity, sort of medium size, 3,000 employee type of companies. And then I've been at Minesense here for almost 10 years. So Minesense was my first startup early stage company. The common thread through my career is definitely growth and how do you grow businesses. And so as part of that, I've been quite involved with building sales teams in different contexts and a total of 24 different sell into industries. So seeing quite a wide gamut of what works in different industries. I'm looking forward to the session.
Wonderful. Good to see you. Tatiana, I'll come over to you next. I mentioned in the intro that you've had a wealth of experience at SAP and in other roles. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout my experience, which differs so much from the panel here, and I love the fact that it differs, because I come from a perspective where I lead and I am usually the first contact with the external market whenever we are looking at external candidates, and I close partnership with internal leaders for the companies that I have worked, Microsoft, SAP currently, and in the past Amazon, building teams from scratch, expanding teams, opening new regions. So the complexity of it all has always been considered, and also helping onboard new sales leaders in the company, helping them understand the complexities of these big tech companies that I have been serving for the last 10 over years. It has been very interesting. My career, I have come into the US. I'm not originally from here, but coming to the US 12 years ago, started dedicated to be talent attraction, partnering closely within the tech world, which is one of my passions, and absolutely dedicated to talent attraction. And I do believe that talent attraction is the first door where we welcome people. And it is the most important area whenever we are building businesses, because we help establish the culture. We develop how businesses are going to be done through the people that we hire. So super excited for this session and looking forward for the questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you for being here. And Amy, to Tatiana's point, we have a few different perspectives on the panel today, and you're coming from a different perspective, which is kind of the VC side of things. So yeah, I'm curious about what you see in your role, how you interact with sales leadership in the companies you're investing in, and a little bit more about that dynamic.
For sure. I've been on the VC side for about 20 years, but I've also been on the startup side as well for 6. So I kind of seen both sides of it. On the VC side, you know, we don't really get involved with hiring unless it's kind of C-level or whoever your top first salesperson is to lead. We kind of leave everything to the team to do. And then when it's a really big hire that's important to the team, you know, they'll use us to help with the interviews to kind of look at the skills and the culture and kind of give an outside perspective. So we help our teams out in that way. So I'd say, you know, we see a lot. I have companies who are pre-revenue. I have companies that are $100 million in revenue. So completely different industries, different stages. But, you know, we're always there to kind of see what's going on, look at any problems that other companies have had to be able to see that repeatability, or what we call institutional knowledge. And that's how we try to help out the best with our teams.
That's great. So yeah, when it comes to that sales leadership and hiring those C-suite roles, I know I hear from our members, you know, that comes with a big price tag. So it's really important that you get the right person in the right role. And they're also critical to delivering on your numbers. So I'm curious from the panel, you know, what have you seen in terms of finding the right fit? Is it the industry experience? Is it the stage of company they've worked in the past, or is it something else? And Matt, you referenced a very technical sale. So I'm curious to get your input on what's critical in terms of finding the right fit for sales leadership.
Sure. Look, I think the thing that I find most difficult about hiring salespeople is that the ones who are really good at it are really good at selling themselves. And sometimes that's not, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fit the bill. Look, what we're all looking for is someone who's got sectoral experience, who's a track record of hitting their numbers. And that's great. But the other reality is that we're in tech. We're selling into new markets with, you know, in a high growth industry. The people who have done that in your space successfully are probably have experience that isn't necessarily relevant anymore to exactly what you're doing, and B, have probably priced themselves out of the market for what what you're looking at. So we don't always look for someone who's, or you know, sometimes we find that unicorn who has, you know, exactly the same experience as what you're looking for. But I think it's pretty rare. Certainly, most of the candidates, when we've gone out looking, either they don't have quite the right kind of experience, or you know, we need to start looking at sort of parallel capabilities. I think when we look at experience outside of our sector and what's going to be really successful, we kind of look at 3 things. We look for someone who's got a really strong process orientation. Someone who's got experience in a similar stage of company, and someone who's been working in an industry with very similar deal characteristics. And just to sort of dive a little bit deeper on any one of those 3, you know, the process orientation I think is really helpful because it helps them come up to speed quickly on the characteristics of your deal flow, the characteristics of the sale process, and engage more capably with the rest of the team. If we look at sort of the industry or the sort of similar stage company, you know, we've often brought on people who were either from companies at a much earlier stage where they're kind of used to trying to do everything, which can really break that process orientation, which is a bit challenging. Similarly, people who are from much more mature companies, obviously they often expect to have everything set up and ready to go, and that can be really challenging. And then I think, you know, when we talk about an industry with similar deal characteristics, usually what we're looking for is someone who has operated within a very similar sales cycle. You know, they've got a level of complexity that's similar to what we do, a length of sales cycle that's similar to what we see, similar sort of customer personas, and that can be as broad as whether it's B2C or B2B, or that can be a lot more specific depending on the kind of sale you're trying to execute on. And then ultimately, the last thing is just, you know, the degree to which candidates have been working in a similar sort of a similar relationship structure in terms of whether, you know, you've got to build a really deep relationship with your client before you can close something, or whether you need the velocity to be a little bit more transactional. So, you know, given alignment of those characteristics, we find that we can bring people in and have them be really, really successful, even if they have no direct sectoral experience.
That's really helpful. And thanks for kind of breaking that down into those key areas. That's really useful. Jeff, I'm curious about your thoughts. What are some of the factors that you consider are most important for sales leadership? Sorry, Jeff, you're just on mute. Apologies.
No, my fault. You think we'd have that, or at least I'd have that figured out by now. I think the first one I'll pick up on a theme that Matt was talking about. I think it's really, really important to identify that when you're looking for that salesperson, most of the products, the companies I imagine that are listening, they're technical sales. And so really important to view that sales itself is a functional skill set. And I think that a lot of times that's underappreciated because it's in the soft skill category as opposed to the hard skill category. But that itself, some people have been trained and have the ability to do it, other people's don't. And then you've got the technical side. And as Matt said, it's very difficult to find that combination. Some people understand the technology and the industries that you're selling into, but also have the sales talent. But I would definitely view it as two separate things, and you're trying to look for the best combination of the two. And then recognizing if you hire somebody where they're lighter on. So if you've got somebody that really understands the technology in the industry, but they might need more assistance and more training on the position, all the sales skills, the positioning, how do you say things, the closing deals, all those things. Or conversely, if you do hire somebody who's a fantastic sales person, and I agree with Matt, track record is very, very important, but they don't come with that understanding of the industry you sell into or your technology, then really focus on training them. So I completely agree with what Matt was saying on that, and just wanted to add that with a slight different lens. Another aspect, another theme that I'll throw on the table when you're looking for salespeople is it's very, very different, and there's different analogies to use, but one is blue ocean versus red ocean. So selling a brand new, like in our case at Minesense, it's a technology, it's a new to the world technology, and there's lots of advantage to that. We're the only game in town, which is fantastic. But our selling is convincing customers to adopt a new technology, a completely new way of doing things, as opposed to what most sales will come with is they're from the red ocean side where the category is already established, and their skill set is saying, well, my widget is better than the other company's widget. Those are very, very different skill sets. And the first one is harder to find than the second one, just because there's more companies that have the same widgets as other companies than there are the companies like we're all trying to do, which is brand new technologies. So if you can find somebody that has that aspect, that's I think that's really, really, really important.
Excellent. That's really helpful. I'm curious, Tatiana, when you look at this, what factors are important? And I think also that onboarding that was referenced, like getting people up to speed. I know SAP, you do a ton of work in this space. I'm curious about, the factors that are important and the support needed to get the right salespeople in place.
Yeah, I loved what Jeff said related to training, right? It's super important for salespeople to really understand on what they are selling. So no matter who you are hiring, if having the experience and carrying those quotas and being able to either have the experience to B2B or B2C, it's super important. But whenever you're joining a new company, you will need to understand that will take a lot of effort for you to learn the product, really understand what you're selling. And it's absolutely the key to success. In my career, I've had the opportunity to hire people for early roles whom I've seen grow. And most of these professionals that I have coached and I have worked side to side by were professionals that were fully dedicated to learning the product, really understanding the mission of the company, and being able to bring that message to their customers. It's super important for salespeople to be not, of course, sales speech is important, but really understand and be convinced in their own hearts of what they're selling. It's crucial for their customers. Otherwise, they're just telling stories and they're not convincing enough. So a strong onboarding, it's extremely important, but also come with a learner's mindset whenever joining the company and understanding that you don't know what you don't know, which is a good thing. And then you start understanding that you don't know what you know, and you will be able to have all those learning opportunities and partner. So peer learning is extremely important. Having the opportunity to really go to campus, see how your peers are doing it, learn from the best practices from your peer is extremely important as well. So 1,000%. And as you continue to grow on your careers, evolving through the learner's mindset, and it's like asking yourselves, what am I missing? What is not there? What do I need to improve? Do I know the product really well? Do I know why am I selling this product to my customer, and how can I help my customer, so that you can really message that to your customer. Super important.
That's excellent. Thank you. And Amy, I think I saw you nodding earlier when Matt said that great salespeople are great at selling themselves, and you have to be careful with that. But I'm curious what else resonated for you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that we spend the most time on is finding really good references. And when people don't give references, that's a big red flag. I think when I do the interviews, I'm always looking for the red flags. Like the team can look at, who's a great fit and who can understand the product and who can go to sales. But I'm kind of looking more at if we hire the wrong person, now it's 6 months, now we have to fire them. Now we have to find this process over again. So I think I go in a little bit more negative just because I'm on the board side of like, is the culture fit correct? If you have a leader that's on the team, they're going to switch your culture if they have a different culture than you. So like, how do you ask questions and dig into that side of it? Because it will impact your company. And then two, LinkedIn is a great tool for finding out, who has worked for this person before. I love getting somebody who's worked for them. So not just who is the CEO, who had them in, did they hit their numbers, but who had to work under this person and did they enjoy working under that person? Did they get that person to work harder and strive and it was easier to learn, like, again, hitting that culture side. So, it's one thing and you're always looking, you're like, I need to hit my budget this year. I need this person. And so you're leaning in to really get them on as fast as possible, but then also maybe slowing down to look at the downside of hiring the wrong person and giving that the time to kind of sit in and make sure that you feel confident about them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, how do you know when it's not a good fit? And so I'd love to touch on that a little bit more with the four of you. So, how do you ensure when you make that investment that you can, what are those milestones you need to keep a track of to make sure that you've got the right fit? What are your red flags? I'm curious. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out, but I'm curious, what do you look for after you've made the hire to make sure this is going to be a long-term viable employee? So Matt, let me know what your thoughts are.
Sure. Yeah. We'll let someone else talk first next time. Look, I think the bottom line is just the top line, right? You look at the quarterly numbers, if people are closing, then you're in good shape. With that said, I think it's absolutely true that especially early on in the company's development, sales people have a huge role to play in guiding the development of product and guiding the sort of arc of commercialization of the business as a whole. And so there's really a broader role that you're asking them to play. So then the question is, how do you benchmark them against that broader role? And I think, this is where you just need to be a little bit more holistic about it. I'd say, think about what role the salespeople need to play within your broader business, whether that's obviously closing deals, but, bringing critical feedback in from the field to your product development team so they're getting the product done right. Turn that kind of broad arc into sort of more of a balanced scorecard approach that you can evaluate people against, and then measure them against that, even if it ends up being a little bit more qualitative than how you would typically evaluate a salesperson's performance.
Thanks, and Matt, I'm catching the cue. I'm just gonna come at you guys randomly now, so you're in big trouble. Tatiana, what are your thoughts? What type of benchmarks and milestones do you use?
Yeah, so I was just making notes because I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose my train of thought. As Amy said, it is super important for us to make sure that we are asking the right questions, looking for the right signs, making sure that the person is going to be a good fit for the team, and the team is also going to be a good fit for the person that we are hiring for, right? I have one message for sales people listening us out now is it's also your opportunity to interview the managers when you are interviewing for the role. Make sure that the role is always also right for you, because it goes both ways, right? The risk for the company whenever they're hiring, it's a huge risk. if it doesn't work, they'll have to let you go. It's going to have an impact on the team. They're going to be, suffering with customer engagement and all. But for the individual, for the candidate, it's also a big impact. We usually depend on our work to, for our livelihoods. It has a big impact on us, in our own selves whenever we don't have jobs. So we have also to make sure that it is both ways. So use the interviews and use this conversations with the management team, with your interviewers, to make sure that you're asking the right questions and understanding, is this role the right fit for me? Can I be successful in this role? Do I see myself working with this kind of product? Do I see myself working with this kind of team? Are their goals aligned to my goals? Is the style of this company aligned to my own style? Can I adapt? Can I learn? Am I interested in learning? Making sure that we are asking those questions whenever we are considering a career change is extremely important, because we know that the impact goes both ways. So I think that's the biggest thing that I really want everyone to have in mind, is if you are in doubt, say no to an offer. It's okay. Even if the manager says, oh, but we love you, we think you're going to be perfect for the role, it's okay if you say, well, I don't think so. No hard feelings. We are all professionals. We are all grown-ups. We can deal. We're going to find other people. And also for managers, right? Whenever we are hiring, it's always making sure that we are hiring the right person, that we do think, because a big part of things going the right way is us believing things are going to go the right way. It's called the self-prophecy. So we need to make sure that we are believing in the professionals that we are hiring.
I love that. And I think, yeah, that's an important note, that when you're looking to hire talent, that it's really important to do your due diligence to make sure they're set up for success, because ultimately it's a real person we're talking about, and it has an impact on the business, but on that person too. Jeff, maybe I'll get your thoughts next.
Yeah, I guess picking up on some of the themes that Tatiana and Matt were talking about, for me, one of the critical things is the business model and the fit with the business model. So first of all, as a business, you should be very clear as to what that is. And in hiring a salesperson or a sales leader, they're going to be literally that function is the most important function, who's explaining your business model externally to the customers that are going to reward you with that and provide you revenue. So as a more specific case at Minesense, all of our entire business model, our pricing model, and the way we approach everything is value-based. And we mean by that we, to our mining customers, we increase their profitability and we increase their sustainability. We reduce their carbon reduction, their carbon intensity. And so we literally want the philosophy, and we believe have the philosophy, we wake up every day thinking about that first, and we assume that we get that right, that our customers will pay us fairly and we'll make we'll get good pricing and make good margin. And one of the mistakes we made was not pushing hard enough on that and hiring a sales leader, and having somebody came in that was much more traditional, transactional oriented. They thought the win was we got something over on the customer kind of thing, and that was just not a fit for us at all. So that fit with your business model, whatever that is super, super important, and to be really picky about that, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Thank you. Matt, did you want to chime in?
Look, I was just going to say I totally agree. I think, Jeff, your industry is a lot like mine, and my number one test for new salespeople is, do they obey the 2 ears, 1 mouth rule? It's such an easy test, and if you're going to be doing strategic sales, you got to have that absolutely nailed.
That's great. Amy, I'll come back to you. I know you had kind of raised a couple of your red flags earlier, but I'm curious, hearing the other panelists or any other thoughts on kind of how to know if it's the right fit and what some of those flags are.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you hire a salesperson. I think it is still a team effort. Like, to one of Matt's comments, it's like you got to hit your high level numbers, but if you're bringing somebody into that role, what are the high level numbers? And usually, depending the stage of the company, it's always a very different conversation, but the founder is always the best salesperson. So you bring in a new salesperson, Matt, it's true. but it's like, how do you spend time with them, get them onboarded, you know, depending when they're coming in that year, you know, what is their budget? How do you set those milestones so you set it up for success with them and you give them the support so that then you can hand over the reins? I think that handing over the reins portion is kind of slow and steady is how you get to success. It's not just like put them in the deep water and you got to go and I've got other things to do. I think the team needs to help them as much as they're helping the team, and the founder still needs to help with that onboarding. And the reality is, as a founder, like, you never go away from sales because you're always just going to be the best advocate of the company. And so just having everybody in the right mindset to make that transition and to help them be successful so that then later they become that, you know, advocate for the company. And that probably takes 6 months to a year. It's not something you can see in 2 or 3 months. It takes time to really see it. But I would also say one of the biggest things I look for in a salesperson is like, will they roll up their sleeves and do the job? Because I don't care if you're a CRO, if you're not going to roll up the sleeves and take those calls and do those calls, you're not going to be able to help your team out. And so like, I believe in any role in especially in startups, like, you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and do it yourself so that then you can help with the team. And if that's not your attitude, like, you should not be in the startup world.
Thanks, Amy. I actually did have a question from the audience that kind of ties in well at this point, so I might bring it forward. The question was, if a founder is doing the selling now and it's working, how do you know when it's time to stop and delegate that to a hire? And maybe, you know, to your point, Amy, it's you have to get that person onboarded, et cetera. But I'm just curious in terms of timing and maybe any tips on how that process can work well. Maybe Matt, do you mind weighing in on that question?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's pretty simple. It's as soon as you find someone who can do the job better. You know, I'm fortunate in that we've got a couple of people in our team now who I think are at that threshold, and it's a great relief, I got to tell you, to be able to have people who are better than you, who can do the job better than you, who are able to, you know, you're able to sling them out into those commercial conversations and have them just absolutely nail it. It's tremendous. It's a tremendous sense of excitement when you as a founder can sort of go and make that happen.
Great. Jeff, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the challenges of small companies is that, and I completely agree with Amy, everybody has to be able to roll up their sleeves and get involved in a lot of things. And part of that is, in the early days, you're doing things that you're not that expert in, but you have to do that because you can't afford to get somebody else. But as you grow the company, you have the ability to add more and more experts in certain functions. And I think one of the most important functions, other than developing a fantastic technology, every company has to grow. And so therefore sales is, you know, you could argue is the next most important function. So I think it's very, very important for founders, and I have a strong opinion, so I might be slightly controversial, but most of them are, or you meet many of them who are not natural salespeople. So the vision for the product, what we want to sell, I agree, has to come from the founder. But they need to be very realistic with themselves. Do they themselves have that skill set or not? And you know, some people do, some people don't. But you see founders who are in that role too long, in my view. And if you looked at larger organizations, that individual would never, ever in a gazillion years be put into a sales role because it's not their individual skill set. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. We all are good at different things. And so that real recognition of and self-awareness, is this something I'm okay at or not so good at? And the answer to that question will affect the timing of when do I bring somebody in. And you don't lose sight of, you know, the vision or what it is or what you're trying to sell, but there's a difference between what it should be and the ability to actually go out and convince other people. That's a skill set unto itself.
Excellent. Well, maybe I'll segue kind of from there into the next question that I had kind of planned to ask, which ties back a little bit to the audience poll earlier around, availability of skilled sales talent. And I'm curious about your opinion on sales talent development and training, external and also potentially internal. What are you seeing in terms of the sales talent you're looking at in terms of their access to training that sets them up for success? Do you think we need to have more available technical sales training in the ecosystem to support more talent availability? I'm interested to get a bit of your perspective on this. So Matt, you're not going to go first. Promise you. It's going to go. I'm going to come maybe over to Tatiana, and I think you'll probably have an interesting perspective. And certainly I know you do a lot to support this internally at SAP.
Absolutely, yes. So when we talk about adult learning, we know that adults learn better by doing, not necessarily in a classroom, not necessarily through peer learning, but absolutely being thrown to the wolves per se. So the best kind of learning is indeed doing the job, but you have to have some certain learning. Most of the companies that I have had experience working with, we've had always developed our own trainings based on our own products. And there always has been a strong onboarding, at least 3 months, where individuals have their quotas kind of secured, bigger companies, better structures, more mature markets that we have been operating. So absolutely different from a startup world, 100%. But I do think it's extremely advantageous for salespeople whenever they have the opportunity to join the company, have that kind of mindset of I'm just going to be learning, going and having contact with the customers, understanding customer needs, and being able to bring that back and connect that to what the product can offer. So absolutely, learning is 100% important. Does it have to be internal? Does it have to be external? I think it varies a lot according to the structure the company can offer. If you ask me, we cannot support internal learning. Yes, go for an external partner for sure. But again, the most important experience that we can provide and you as a salesperson can have is actually doing the job, getting uncomfortable, having those tough conversations, making mistakes, saying, I don't know the answer. I'm going to go back to you. So it's absolutely the best way for us to learn something.
Jeff, I'd love to get your input on that, and if some of what Tatiana shared resonated for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think she's bang on. The training is very important, including the real life as much as possible. And I think a lot of companies may not have the time to necessarily bring people through the stages that she referenced, but as much as possible, I think that's a really smart thing to do. And pairing in different ways. So if possible, pairing with people that are out in the field and sales, and also definitely pairing them with the technical people that are really the experts in the knowledge that the salesperson has to understand enough that they can properly operate with it and convince customers of why they should buy that product. I mean, both are super important and as real life as possible.
That's excellent. Amy, can I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I sit in a different seat, but looking at some of my companies, and this is one of the bigger companies, but I think something that I've seen them do that's excellent is to have onboarding videos with quizzes at the end that are not extremely hard, but just gets candidates, and they would give the onboarding to the candidates while they were going through the interviewing process. So it was a way to get the candidates have a better idea of what the company's culture is like, what it's like to, sell their products, getting them onboarded before they even get hired. And it's something that's fairly easy, to plug Thinkific, which we're not invested in, but is a great VC company. I think you can use their platform to do it. But it just made so much sense when I first saw them do it. I was like, that makes a ton of sense. You do it once. It takes a lot of work. Nobody has any time, but if you can take the time to do it and then give it to your candidates, and then you want to know something, the candidates who don't even open it, are they the candidates? Can you take them out right away? And then the ones who are going through it and taking the time to understand the company, now all of a sudden, when you go to your start date, they already have some background on the company and you can get there faster. And so, it's a little tricky, but it's like, why not put it up front if you can and have that dialogue there.
That's awesome. Thanks for the shout out. We built our entire Scaleup Academy curriculum on ThinkFX, so
Great.
big supporter. Matt, let's get your thoughts on kind of training and development for sales.
Sure. So, look, I mean, there's two elements of developing great salespeople. Part of it is developing their knowledge of what it is they're trying to sell, and that's always going to be specific to the company. But I think one of the real challenges with hiring and building a real high performance sales team is that it's not like hiring an engineer or an accountant or a technician. Not only that they haven't been they haven't necessarily been trained in a consistent way, but rather there's no consistent language that salespeople are all using together. You talk to a mechanical engineer, and they're all going to be able to talk to you about the challenges in their work in a consistent language. And I've often found that getting a sales team to speak the same language together is a real challenge. It's a real challenge to getting them working in concert with one another, and it's a real challenge in sort of getting that 1 + 1 = many kind of calculus out of a really high performing team. For that reason, I think I'm a huge evangelist for some of the more structured training programs you can put a sales team through. I did the Miller-Heiman system, a decade ago, and still use a lot of the same language that I picked up through that process. But I mean, look, so much of sales is communication. It's about communicating with customers. It's about communicating with the rest of the internal team to share what that team has learned and constantly do better in terms of how we approach our customers. And it seems like a lot of money to send your whole sales team off, take a week of their time and pay $5,000 a head to go have them trained on a sales system. But just in terms of increasing the effectiveness of what they're going to do after that, having that sort of consistent platform, that consistent background, that consistent language, I think it's absolutely a worthwhile investment.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. And I might kind of pull on that thread a little bit. We had a question in the chat asking how to build a strong sales culture across multiple regions or countries. And I think that you gave a few thoughts there that resonate. But I'm curious to hear from the rest of the team, when you're building out your sales team and you're looking at a global footprint, like how do you ensure that you're driving that consistent messaging? So Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot with this question from the audience. So how do you build that strong sales culture across multiple countries and around the world?
Yeah, and just put our context into experience. So we are currently selling on most continents around the world, and for us, because our mining focus, South America is a particularly important region. So this is a very real question for us. I think the two things, I think the panelists have already talked to both of them, but they're really worth focused on. One is language that Matt talked to. And so at Minesense, we're officially bilingual, not the usual French-English, unfortunately for me, because that is my second language, but we're officially Spanish-English. But we don't mean that language. We mean, as Matt was referring, the language of whatever function you're talking about, in this case, sales. And so whichever system or methodology you use is very, very powerful. And my belief is that there's a lot of good ones out there. So the pick of which one isn't the most critical thing. The critical thing is once you've picked it, you drive it. And so the language is very powerful because it arranges everybody syncing around the same lines, and to be very specific with your language. So we have market strategy and sales language specific to Minesense that, if somebody heard us talking, they may not really know what we're talking about, but we're very adamant on this is how we use what that language means. And related to that is that structure. So wherever you are in the world, it has to be exactly the same approach, exactly the same structure of how your salespeople are approaching the customers. Very, very important. So if you walked in, everything is exactly the same, except this meeting's in English, that meeting's in Spanish, this one's in Indonesian. But other than that, it's exactly the same of what you're hearing and the approach you're taking.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. Tatiana, can I get your thoughts on this? It was a question around building strong sales culture across the world.
Yeah, so I'll piggyback on what Matt and Jeff said. Absolutely important to have individuals that are tuned in And when they say language, they're referring to culture, tuned in to the products that they're selling, and also having the same goals, right? Like it is important for whatever product we are focused on, for them to understand what the quota they are carrying on that product, how much impact that product is going to benefit their company and their own selves. We all know that salespeople like numbers and numbers into their accounts. So it's super important also for salespeople to be informed of how much is that going to affect their own quotas, their end of the year compensation, their entire packages. So having the full understanding of sales systems, having the full understanding of how compensation is structured around products that they are selling and percentages of the margins that they are bringing to the company, it's extremely important. And that absolutely brings all the workforce, all the sales force to the same language per se, no matter French, Spanish, or English.
Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, a trend that I've been seeing in the last few years, really from COVID, from the lockdown, as I feel like salespeople and all people in the company are really, so many companies have moved to remote. And so they're really asking for those in-person events together. And a lot of companies I'm seeing, depending what size you are, but if you can have, a small conference where you bring your customers in for appreciation, and then the whole team is there, not just sales, but everybody, and then you're working together. I think getting that language, because you're all in the same place, seeing each other, having the feel of the culture, seeing the customers there, like it's kind of a 2-in-1. It's a company builder, plus you're also seeing your customers, and you're all, it costs money. You have to fly everybody into one spot, but I feel like the companies, the one like on the NPS, when they ask what can we do more of, they're like, we want to be in person. We want to be in person, because they're missing that connection. And it's just one way to kind of get everybody together. And I'm seeing it as a trend across all our companies.
If I could pile onto that, Amy, I have long been a huge critic of trade shows and conferences. And I would say over the last 3 years, I've become a huge supporter, simply because, to the point that Tatiana made earlier, you want people, the best way to get people working together is to get them to work on something, right? And, rather than, we've thought about, oh, should we do an offsite with our sales team? I'd just rather put them on the show floor and have them interact with people, and then get together over a couple of beers afterwards and be like, okay, like, what did you learn? What was, I heard you say that thing, like, what was like, I was talking about? Was he for real? Like that kind of sort of informal conversation, but like in real time around the work that a team is trying to get done is absolutely invaluable. And I send my team now to trade shows in particular, where even if they're not really in our core markets, the time that they spend on the show floor together, actively evangelizing for us and all the things we do, I think is super, super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And just piggybacking on what you said as well, Matt, people sell based on information and data they have, but people primarily connect with others through feelings. And those feelings are whenever we are in person, they have a different level of scale. So if I try to sell you this bottle and I tell you, oh, it's a great bottle, it keeps water colder for longer. But if I tell you, look, think about your thirst, think about a very hot day and how you can quench your thirst, it's absolutely going to connect you to your feelings. And that goes a long way. Whenever we are bringing salespeople together, they sharing their experiences, their challenges, their difficult customers, how they close that deal, and that they're learning from those peer conversations and those informal conversations over beer, over drinks. It does connect people, and it aligns the team in one purpose, and it brings them under one umbrella in one language.
That's some excellent words of advice. And I'm glad I brought 4 amazing people to this call today to share their insights. I know our audience has already gotten a lot and we have to wrap up, but I'll maybe just do a quick final rapid fire. I know many startup founders join these live webinars. And so, and they have big ambitions. So hopefully they're hiring salespeople and growing. So maybe just some quick final words of advice from each of you for those startups on the line who are just starting out, but who have big ambitions. And Amy, maybe I'll come to you first on this one.
Yeah. All right. You know, I still back like founders are the best salespeople. So like you are doing the right job being out there. And when you get that salesperson who you think you can work with or they can do a better job than you, I would say that's like for sure a time to take the leap. I know it's really hard. You're constantly fighting time and you're constantly fighting expenses, right? And so you have to prioritize one over the other. And I think if you do find somebody who you think can do that job, it's worth taking the risk.
Thank you. Tatiana.
Yeah. Well, I will absolutely leave a message on talent attraction because it's my area of expertise. One thing that I have to say is whenever you are interviewing salespeople, make sure that you build a structure and a mechanism around those interview processes and you're using them for everyone. I would say that the best technique for whenever we are hiring salespeople is always asking them to present business cases. It's a great way for you to evaluate their presentation skills, their communication skills, for you to evaluate how they're engaging with their audience. It's a very successful way, and having in-person conversations, it goes a very long way. So if you do have the opportunity, bring them on site, interact with them face to face. It does go a long way.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeff, quick last words from you and Matt.
I guess be very, very clear on what the benefits to your customer are and spend a lot of time on that. And then be very self-aware in terms of the assessment of how to best present that. And is that yourself? Is that bringing on a salesperson and when? But get very clear on the first, and then you can evaluate the second one, whether that's you or a new sales leader.
I mean,
Last but not least.
from my side, from my side,
Go
I would
ahead.
say, look, so many of the founders in our space or the early employees in our space are technical. Sales can seem mystifying, but it is absolutely critical you get it right in the early stages. I would say demystify it, right? Don't think about it as this magical thing that, you know, these guys with great hair know how to do somehow or other. It's just an algorithm, right? Think about the steps, think about the process, think about the things that you need to convince customers of on that route from first contact to dry ink on paper. Think about the steps you need to go through, plot it out as a process, look for the milestones that are going to prove progress, look for the things that are going to trip you up, and you'll do great.
Awesome. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you to our speakers, Matt, Jeff, Tatiana, and Amy.